Hi everyone. In today's video, we'll be talking about all things interview and research questions, what to ask, how to ask it, and how to write the ultimate UX research questions. We'll also share our free question bank, which has over 350 ready-to-go questions for you to use in your research. So stick with us to learn how to craft and ask your perfect questions to maximize your insights. I'm Hillary, Education Lead at Maze. First off, let's cover a quick misconception. When we talk about research questions, it can mean one of two things. First, we have a research question, which is a question you're trying to answer through research. Like, what do our users like about this design? Or how usable is this product feature? This might tie in with your research goals and objectives. And then there are the questions we ask during research and in user interviews. These are often also called research questions, but it's important to differentiate. For the purpose of today's video, when we say research questions, we're talking about what you're asking participants in the research. So now that that's cleared up, let's get into it. We all know research is invaluable for product development, but to get the right insights, you need to ask the right questions. You need questions which get the information you need without leading answers or creating bias. But this can be a tricky balance. The kind of questions you ask will depend on your research goals. So before you get into the nitty-gritty of what to ask, determine why you're asking it and what you're aiming to uncover. It helps to look at your overarching research plan and objectives, but you should also consider individual goals on a project-by-project basis, as what you're asking will differ a lot depending on where you are in the product development process. For example, if you're early in product discovery, you might want to uncover user intent and pain points. Or if you're working later down the line, you might be looking to gather feedback or find out if a particular feature would be useful. If you're working on a survey, your questions might differ again. So feel free to take a look at our in-depth guide to survey questions. Once you know what you want to uncover with your research, it's time to think about what questions will help you do that. The questions you ask in research can be categorized many ways, by objectives, research scenario, or where you are in your product journey. Since different questions can be used in multiple situations, we like to organize them by their main focus. This gives us 3 areas. Questions about the problem, like what task are your users trying to achieve, what their pain points are, and what solution they'd like. Questions about people, looking at your user demographics and how they use products. And questions about the product itself. Things like how users feel about content or design elements, whether the product is easy to navigate, and what features users like or dislike. Now that we've gone over what kinds of questions you can expect to use during research, let's look at how you can write the ultimate questions. The questions you ask set the standard of data you'll gather during your research. So it's crucial to have questions you can rely on to maximize insight and minimize mistakes. The best questions are clear, precise, and unbiased. Everything from the language you use to the structure and format of questions can influence your user's answer. So it's important to keep these principles in mind when writing your questions. The biggest tip I have is to be a neutral party and avoid leading your research participants. Research isn't helpful if it's biased. So your questions need to be impartial. We've spoken about the false consensus effect in other videos, but put briefly, it's a psychological effect where when we work closely on a project, our brains naturally overestimate how much others will agree with us. This is why unbiased questions and solid usability testing are so important during user research. Keep in mind that just because you liked concept A over concept B doesn't mean everyone will. And just because you find something intuitive or it makes sense for how you would use a product doesn't mean it'll be easy to use for everyone. Consider questions like, how would you use concept A? While this doesn't seem like anything out of the ordinary, when you break it down, the question assumes the person would use concept A and presumes they prefer that over a potential other option. One way to stay neutral is to steer clear of leading questions like this. Questions that subconsciously favor one thing over another or plant an opinion in the user's mind. Instead, try asking open questions that allow the users to make up their own mind and don't presume preferences. Closed questions are ones that result in a simple yes or no answer. Open questions are the opposite. To maximize your research, you want to avoid phrasing things in a closed way. The benefit of open-ended questions is that they give your testers the opportunity to expand on their answers, to work through their experience, and share details with you that might otherwise be left out. For example, asking, "Did you like the product?" might answer whether a user liked it, but you'll be left wondering why they liked it. It's also somewhat of a leading question because you're presuming they did in fact like the product. Instead, you could ask, "How do you feel about the product?" This ascertains the same information as to whether they liked it, but will also allow them to form their own opinion and share additional information. If you do ask closed questions, it's a good idea to keep aside some follow-up queries to dig deeper and gather extra insight from your participants. Our third tip is to take it one question at a time. Most of us think best when our minds are clear and able to focus on one thing, so avoid bombarding people with multiple questions at once. Rather than asking something like, "What do you think of the design, copy, and layout?" ask individual questions about the design, the copy, and then the layout. This helps make sure your test participants don't feel overwhelmed or merge their thoughts into one answer, when in fact they may feel differently about each element of the page. Some questions might lend themselves naturally to being combined, like, "Which concept did you prefer and why?" But keep in mind that you can always ask questions like "why" as a follow-up. This allows users space to think and time to form individual answers and feedback for each part of the question. Next is all about language. Used well, words can move us, educate us, and even sway our opinions, which is why it's so important that the language you use when asking questions is intentional. Your words and questions should be carefully constructed, and it's critical that you help your research participants find their own words rather than simply echoing yours. We've already mentioned ways you can do this, like asking unbiased and open-ended questions, but you can also empower your participants to find their own voice by putting them at the center of your questions and language. This means asking questions directed at your user and using person-centered language like "you" or "your needs." Ask emotive questions like, "How did you feel?" to understand more about root causes and help build empathy with your users. This kind of language is a great way to help people find their own voice, which in turn allows you to unlock more powerful insights that can really inform a user-centered product. Our final tip is to use questions to test and validate your own assumptions or opinions. Simply put, ask questions you think you know the answer to. If you think it's obvious users will prefer one feature over another, see if you're right. Or if you think a particular design element works best on a different page, ask testers where they prefer it. Like with any research, while you may be user adjacent, at the end of the day, you're not your user. You're the expert in your product, but they're the expert in using it. So trust their opinions and use their knowledge, preferences, and experience to your advantage, confirming your suspicions or disproving them. Either way, you'll gain a ton of valuable insights to move forward with. Okay, that's it for our tips on creating and asking questions in your research. We hope you found this video useful and feel ready to go forth and write your own questions. But if you'd rather use some pre-made ones, we have a free resource for you in the form of the Maze Question Bank. It's an open source database of over 350 multifunctional research questions that's entirely free to use. We designed it for our own research at Maze, but I felt it was a bit too good not to share. So feel free to click the link in the description and use the questions as you'd like. And if you're interested in more info on user research, then take a look at the other links in the description for all the resources mentioned in this video. See you again soon.